Well, now, this week I was reading a paper in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. You know, the way you do sort of thing. Beats reading the Beano. And it was about tackling the benefits of regular physical exercise, I guess you'd say. And we might think running and things like that. Running carries the risk of injury, of course, especially at a certain stage in life. These days I only run away from things that are chasing me, I suppose. And that basically leaves us with walking. And walking, it was saying, is actually, pretty much as good as going for a run. That was cheered me up quite a lot. Now, walking, of course, can mean different things to different people. It can mean going for a heads down, hunched back saunter, or it can mean, those people you see striding around the place, swinging their arms violently, or just steady purposeful walking. And what this article was saying is steady purposeful walking is the way to go. You don't want to be like those people who make a joint damaging, muscle pulling exhibition of themselves around the countryside and think they're doing themselves good. But no, mercifully, what these clever cardiologists found in their research was that this sort of thing is really very good for you. This steady, purposeful walk. Now, why is that important? Inactivity, they found in their paper, can lead to a 25% increase in heart disease. And inactivity can lead to a 45% increase in cardiovascular disease mortality. Not to mention a 10% increase in the incidence of cancer, diabetes, and interestingly, untold depression. You don't get to hear much about that in pharma mental health circles, do you? Lack of exercise can be implicated in depression. Now, it seems to me that last bit, the bit about it being good for the inner you to get some steady exercise, that seems to me to be really important. And then the clever cardiologist's article goes on to talk about the benefits of social walking purposefully together, they say, with other people for our personal well-being. Well, I was having a good think by this point. And obviously it got me thinking that who you walk with really seems to matter for your well-being in the Bible as well. Can you think of a place in the Bible where walking gets mentioned? Well, the first mention we get in the Hebrew Bible of anybody walking is God walking in the Garden of Eden in the cool of the day, looking for Adam and Eve to go for a saunter together. In the cool of the day, you see, when they'd clocked off from their role as curators of his garden, he looked for them to go for a walk. Now, it's a very common Hebrew word that's used there, to go, to walk, halak, and it crops up 1,666 times in the Old Testament. And that word is getting a lot of use there. It covers a lot of ground. Well, of course, they didn't have buses, did they? So they probably did a lot of walking. But there's a sort of a metaphorical use of the word as well. And that word then, it covers sort of walking with God. That's the idea. Big contrast, though, what it refers to in that way in the Old and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, it's all about what's required of you. And it refers to living in such a way you are worthy to walk with God in those cool, resting moments that Eden saw. So that gets picked up, I guess, in Micah 6:8, very famous verse, poses the question, what would be enough for a person to bring to God and be accepted in terms of their obedience, for that walk with him in the rest times of the day to be possible? And it says very famously, he's shown you, O mortal, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. You see, what walking with God means there is obedience, walking with him, not against him, as it were. Another example you get in 1 Kings 2, verse 3. David knows he's dying, so he gives, as it were, a father's closing advice to his son Solomon. And he says, be strong, act like a man. Observe what the Lord your God requires, walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. And if you do that, David says, everything will go well with you, my son. You see, this walking with God thing in the Old Testament, it's all about obedience. But you can see the problem there, can't you? The human experience, as it attempted to do that, became one of failing and falling and pleading with the Lord, who'd been alienated and driven people away from his presence, for mercy and for the chance to walk together again. And the abandonment and the loneliness, no more walking with him because couldn't keep up with what was required, the legitimate demands of how we should behave. Not being able to keep up with that led to 10 shades of grief, because not walking with God anymore was too much. A huge phase change was obviously needed, and the New Testament got that by the roots and got to grips with it. Firstly, God heard the desperate human pleading for relief from the treadmill of trying to work your way into God's favour through trying to be a good lad. How did he do that? Well, he did it by sending his very own good lad, his son, as the perfect sacrifice for sin, so we didn't have to go on trying to prove ourselves anymore. And then, after Jesus had not only died, but defeated death in his resurrection and returned to be with God the Father, he sent the Holy Spirit to finish off the job, because the Holy Spirit was sent to be in us and with us, which meant that, well, walking with God's shoes could go back on again. Not only could, but did. And this being reconciled to God again, and this having the Spirit of God in the heart of the believer, that led to enabling and enacting the experience of the Christian of the rest time walking with God, coming right back into life again. Well, not everybody realizes, you see, but here's the whole heart of what a Christian life is. Paul gives it to us straight in 2 Corinthians 6:16. Here's what he says. We are the temple of the living God. Well, the temple's where God's supposed to live, isn't it? We are the temple of the living God. As God has said, and he quotes the Old Testament, I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Now that's healthy walking for your body, mind and spirit, the whole person right there. This is fully rounded human well-being. Because we don't just need physical health, we don't just need physical and mental health, although we do need those. We need spiritual health too. Because there's more to us than just a body and a mind. We love, we enjoy, we reach out for purpose and meaning, and God has placed eternity in our hearts, along with a lurking desire deep down to know him and to walk with him. We're not just physical and mental beings. We're spiritual beings too. And apparently it was the French philosopher hundreds of years ago, Blaise Pascal, wasn't it? Who said it's a God-shaped hole that lies at the bottom of the human heart. And human beings tend to sit somewhere on a spectrum from vague curiosity to a deep desire to know and walk. Not stroll, not charge, but walk purposefully with him. So just as purposeful physical exercise is demonstrably good for us, and just as purposeful intellectual exercise, keeping our brains going, especially as the years go by, is also good for us, so purposeful, deliberate, spiritual exercise is demonstrably good for us too. Getting reconciled with God through living faith in Jesus Christ, walking with him through the ordinary stuff, the mundane daily stuff, as well as the big challenging stuff and the panic moments that come as part and parcel of everyday human life. And increasingly, people concerned with physical and mental health are realizing that spiritual health is very, very good for you too. So looking out on the real world then, what does that actually look like for the Christian? Here's a few real life examples. I know a man whose wife once turned to him in the middle of a normal disagreement, a normal domestic, one where he was doing most of the listening, you know the ones. And she said furiously, "You are actually praying, aren't you?" Well, yes, of course he was. He was stumped by it all. He didn't know which way to turn. So what better way to handle that than walk with God right then? And every time on the farm, before we put the rams in, every time before we start the engine to drive somewhere, get the quad bike out, jump in with a bunch of cattle to run them through the race for some purpose or other, put them in the crash. We just quickly put up a quick word with the Lord. Now, look, that's the sort of thing it means to walk with God. Every time we put the kids to bed, leaning over the edge of the little treasure's cot, wondering about how they are, what they're thinking, what they'll do or become, or what will become of them. Yes, then. Or when your teenager is out late, or when times are hard and cash is short, or someone is ill and we're out of our depth with it all. Walking with God in the heat of the moment, or the cool of the day. That's actually what the life of a Christian is all about. And that's the person a Christian is privileged to be, because what Jesus did on the cross that Good Friday and what he did in the garden on the Easter Sunday takes away the distance from God that had to be there on account of our own sinful mess and failures. And because his return to his Father to send the Holy Spirit with us makes it possible to have that daily experience of walking with God, the God who is with us and is in us. It's that crucial point of turning from living for yourself and trusting your life to him, what he's done to get you back to God. Walking through life, taking your thoughts, your fears, your joys, your stuff to him in the ordinary way you do as you lean on him and work it through, knowing that he now hears and walks with you. Walking with God. Very good for you. You know, that is God's purpose for you and for me. A foretaste of Eden restored. The God who seeks us to walk with us in the cool of the day. Hey, God bless you in that this week. May that be your experience this week. Have a great week.